Stargate Voyager.
Was the Valley of the Kings originally engineered to be massive, apocalyptic bunkers? This is the topic that we're going to dive into in this episode. Hey everyone, Derek Olson here as always. Thanks for tuning into this episode from wherever you are watching or listening, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or somewhere else. Hey, do me a favor, hit subscribe from wherever you like to watch or listen to your podcasts. And if you enjoy these episodes, do me another favor and give me a 5-star rating while you're at it, and even a great comment telling me how good looking I look or something like that. I'd really appreciate that. But thank you for tuning in, and I'm really excited about what we're going to cover in this episode, because I don't know of a whole lot of people talking about this possibility when it comes to the Valley of the Kings. Located near Luxor, Egypt, the Valley of the Kings is over 400 plus miles away from the Great Pyramids of Giza in the north. This is a 6+ hour car drive away. Now, according to the mainstream narrative regarding the Valley of the Kings, for a period of nearly 500 years, from the 18th dynasty to the 20th dynasty, which is approximately 1539 BC to 1075 BC, the dynastic Egyptians, or the dynastic pharaohs, made rock-cut tombs for themselves and their powerful nobles under the new kingdom of ancient Egypt. Now, the Valley of the Kings is known to contain at least 65 tombs or chambers. Now, they range in size from a very simple pit, as seen in Tomb 54, to the incredibly complex so-called tomb, I should say, that is Tomb number 5, which alone has over 120 chambers, supposedly for the sons of Ramses II. And we're going to talk more about this incredible tomb in just a little bit. Now, these royal tombs are decorated with traditional scenes from Egyptian mythology, and they reveal clues to the period's funerary practices and all the Egyptians' afterlife beliefs. Now, almost all of the tombs seem to have been opened and unfortunately robbed in antiquity, yet they still give us an idea of the opulence and the power of Egypt's dynastic pharaohs. And again, when we say dynastic Egypt or the dynastic Egyptians, in a nutshell, we're talking about the Egyptians who arose around 3000 BC and went all the way to 30 BC. So 3000 BC to 30 BC is known as the dynastic Egyptians, with all the different dynasties that followed one after the other. Now, the Valley of the Kings has been a very important focus for Egyptologists and the archaeological world for exploration since the end of the 18th century. And its tombs and its burials continue to stimulate great research and interest. Now, the Valley of the Kings really began to garner significant attention and interest following the discovery of the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922. And by the way, look forward to some future videos on the curse of Tutankhamun. The Valley of the Kings is considered one of the most important and famous archaeological sites in the entire world. The Valley of the Kings is situated over 1,000 feet of limestone, which forms the cliffs in the valley. Now, the quality of rock and of limestone in the Valley of the Kings is quite inconsistent, according to geologists. It ranges from very finely grained to very coarse stone in other places, the latter which has the potential to be very structurally unsound, which is why there are pieces and parts of some of these massive tombs where the limestone inside was quarried and transported from Giza, again over 400 plus miles away and over a 6+ hour car drive away. Imagine that. Now, a lot of people don't realize that the original name for the Valley of the Kings was the Valley of the Gates of the Kings. The gate part somehow got lost in translation, over the decades and centuries and millennia, and now we just call it the Valley of the Kings. But originally, again, it was the Valley of the Gates of the Kings. Something else to point out is that when referring to specific tombs in the Valley of the Kings, you'll normally see or hear people say KV5 or KV50. The KV part stands for Kings Valley. So like when I talk about Tomb 5, I'll probably call it KV5. So that's what's going on there. Now, I've been fortunate to have the privilege of going to the Valley of the Kings numerous times now, at least 4, if my memory serves me right. And it never gets old, especially with what I'm about to share with you here in the next few minutes. Something else to point out is that there appears to be evidence where the limestone face rock or the outcroppings, these hills where the tunnels are buried into, the outsides of them appear to have been manipulated and reshaped to make them wider. Again, you have to take into account millennia of erosion and cataclysm and floods and solar flares, as we'll get into. But again, if you look close, you can see what appears to be unnatural shaping of the rock face. Now, again, when it comes to all things ancient Egypt, in this episode and in most of my episodes, you're often going to hear me refer to the mainstream or the alternative viewpoint because there's so much to unpack. When I say the mainstream viewpoint, it doesn't necessarily mean that I disagree with it, but I'm always just trying to make it clear. Here's what the mainstream narrative is on something, and then here are some possible other options. Now, the mainstream academics refer to these tunnels, these massive tunnels, as simply tombs. But as you look at the maps on the placards or the plaques in front of each tomb, such as KV5 or Tomb 5, which is known as the son of Ramses II tomb, and as you explore deep inside these, you begin to see how some of them appear to actually feel like small subterranean cities. I'm talking they're multi-level. They've got ceilings that go up almost 3 meters high, large corridors, huge pillars, 50 plus different rooms. And again, the KV5 tomb's got, I believe, 120 different chambers. And again, as you look at the map of this specific tomb, KV5, you'll notice that the hallway runs right down to the center or the corridor with rooms on left and right sides, just like a modern day hotel. So it's like this was a hollow temple or a subterranean city literally under the mountain. Now, all of these tombs or tunnels, as I'll call them, at one point had a large granite box located deep inside. Most people refer to these granite boxes as sarcophaguses. Now, some do look like sarcophaguses, some do not. Some just look like boxes in the Serapeum. Some of them, the boxes were pulled out. The point is they all had some kind of large granite box at one point. Now, I mentioned the Serapeum of Saqqara. If you've been inside the Serapeum of Saqqara or you know about this or seen video of it, envision the Valley of Kings like a bigger Serapeum of Saqqara, meaning it's got tunnels that go way deeper under the earth. So again, it's almost like it was a larger Serapeum when you consider these deep tunnels with each one having a massive box at the end. Now, if you're watching this episode by way of YouTube or Spotify, you're going to see all kinds of photos and video footage of what I'm talking about. And so as you see the huge scale of some of these tunnels, so you got to ask yourself, or at least I ask myself, is it actually believable that the dynastic Egyptians, who had copper chisels and hammers as their main source of tools, carved out these precision monstrosities with chisels and hammers? So again, let's talk more about this specific tomb or tunnel known as KV5, the son of Ramses II. Now again, this thing has over 120 chambers, I believe, massive corridor running down the middle. It's got what looks like banquet rooms, dining halls, gathering chambers. Did Ramses II find this massive subterranean bunker or city and repurpose it for his sons because he had so many of them? Because, I mean, this would have been way easier than constructing 20 or 30 different tombs for each of his sons, right? Again, did Ramses II find it, repurpose it, and retrofit it to be a huge tomb labyrinth for his sons? When before its original purpose, ages maybe before, it was actually a shelter, a subterranean apocalyptic bunker. Our tour guide, Muhammad Ibrahim, who's also an Egyptologist and author now of the book Egypt Before the Written History. You need to get that book. Again, a lot of these theories are coming from him, so all props to Muhammad. He's the one that really got me thinking about this on my last tour to the Valley of the Kings. But again, before Ramses II made it into a tomb, was it a pre-diluvian ancient subterranean apocalyptic shelter? For the pre-diluvian ancient Egyptians, as Muhammad would call them, who were being forced to live underground in order to survive the coming solar disasters that were striking the earth around 10,500 BC. Now, let me pause there for a moment and let's talk about the ancient Egyptian gods because this dovetails. So, Ra is the sun god of ancient Egypt, right? He's one of the oldest deities in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Ra is basically the Egyptian word for sun. And as a solar deity, Ra embodied the power of the sun. But he was also thought to be like the sun itself. Now, in Egyptian mythology, there is this interesting tale, and it's kind of known as the destruction of mankind. And at the beginning of time, the story goes, when gods lived among men, a rebellion aimed to overthrow Ra. Again, Ra is the sun god, king of the gods. So despite being a god, Ra had become old and grew weaker every day until humans decided for some reason he was not fit for ruling over them. Now, before this insurrection, Ra had been ready to give up the throne and return to Nun, the primordial ocean. But now he was angry at humankind and took one of his eyes, which transformed into Sekhmet, the lioness god. He then ordered the eye to strike the seditious men with a heat close to the sun's heat. The desert was dyed red with human blood, while the eye was pursuing traitors and killing them one by one. And it didn't stop until the sands were covered with bodies. Now, Sekhmet, in a rage, continued to kill every man and woman in sight for the next few days. But at one point, Ra considered that it had been enough punishment and decided to spare the rest of humanity. Now, again, Sekhmet is the daughter of the sun, Ra, right? Sekhmet is the daughter of the sun, which is considered the afternoon sun, which is the bigger, hotter sun with more energy. So, this whole ancient Egyptian story of Ra going mad with rage, using Sekhmet to wipe out humanity and just spare a little bit of them, could be a way of them telling what happened in ages past, circa 10,500 BC, when the sun grew angry with a red face and it began to put out a lot of heat and solar outbursts and electromagnetic waves. These massive ancient solar flares would have had multiple waves that would have wiped out the advanced technology in literally seconds. And the experts say the same thing could happen today. If an enemy of the United States dropped a pulse bomb over our energy grid, a magnetic pulse, they could wipe out our technology in seconds. The electric grid shut down. Okay, so it's not hard to fathom this. So you would have had these electromagnetic waves wiping out technology. You would have had waves of heat melting everything that was made of metal but not stone. This is might be why we still see these amazing ancient structures like the pyramids and the Sphinx, where you can see weathering on them, and even what looks like solar radiation flare burns. But maybe this is why we don't find the tools where they use the advanced technology, because they were all melted, they were all wiped out. And then there was likely sound waves that happened with these solar outbursts that might have been like the equivalent of thousands of nuclear bombs destroying almost everything. Why am I sharing all this? Again, because I'm trying to give you some building blocks upon which we might build this theory of the ancient Egyptians. Again, the pre-diluvian Egyptians, as Muhammad would call them. These would be the original OGs, the original ancient Egyptians that the dynastics tried to emulate in appearance and with their symbols and hieroglyphs. Did these ancient Egyptians, because the heat on Earth was becoming so hot and radiation too much, they knew they had to go underground. They knew the Earth was changing, so they began to prepare. And with their advanced technology, fairly easily, I would believe, built this underground subterranean bunkers. Again, if you can build the pyramids, you can build subterranean bunkers. If you can build the 100-ton boxes in the Serapeum of Saqqara, you can build this subterranean city under this massive limestone mountain. So were these biggest tunnels in the Valley of the Kings designed before the disaster? And does this explain why the entrance to some of these huge tunnels is so small, so as not to allow radiation to go inside? Again, whoever built the megaliths of Egypt, whether we're talking about the Great Pyramids, whether we're talking about the Valley Temple next to the Sphinx, whether we're talking about the Valley of the Kings or these subterranean bunkers, whoever built these were masters in geology, knowing which stones had which properties and knowing what they would do when combined together. And limestone, if you look into it, according to Muhammad Ibrahim, it's known to absorb negative energy, pollution, and even radiation. And so, is that why they were burying these deep under the mountain? Now, again, as I stated at the beginning of this episode, there's different kinds of tunnels in the Valley of the Kings that some look very primitive and are just like 2 rooms and a little chamber. And then there's tunnels like KV5, the one known for the sons of Ramses II, which looks like an underground city. So not all of them are equal. The point is, so again, I'm theorizing, Muhammad Ibrahim is theorizing, did the dynastic Egyptians, especially the later ones of the 18th, 19th, 20th dynasties, come upon the Valley of the Kings? And maybe originally there was just a couple massive tunnels in there like KV5, and they thought this is the best burial we could ever imagine for ourselves and our nobles. And then as the years went on, did they start to chisel in their own versions of these tunnels, which were smaller and looked more inferior? To be clear, I'm not saying that these were not tombs for the dynastics. Clearly, they were. The dynastics covered the walls, talking about the journey of souls from the first life to the second life, what we call the Book of the Dead. And the dynastic Egyptians made these tunnels look incredibly appealing to the eye, full of color, artwork depictions. I believe they even brought in some of their own sarcophaguses in these tunnels. But again, what I'm theorizing here, what Muhammad Ibrahim is theorizing, is there more to the story here? Is there more to the Valley of the Kings than they were just made by the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasties as tombs for pharaohs and for their nobles. I truly believe that maybe not all, but some of the huge, massive tunnels, again, that look like subterranean bunkers or small cities, I believe those likely did predate the dynastic Egyptians who came along, found them, repurposed them, retrofitted them, said this is the most amazing burial chambers we could ever call our own. And they did. And then I think later on, they started to make even more during their time, such as King Tut's tomb. Well, what do you think? Leave me a comment from wherever you are listening if you're able to, and let me know if you think there's more to the Valley of the Kings than we've been told. Do you think, after everything I've presented here, that these might have been subterranean bunkers that predate the dynastic Egyptians? Or do you think, nope, these were just tunnels buried in the hills by the pharaohs to be tombs? Leave me a comment. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, keep exploring.